The most bizarre historical coincidences you never knew. History is filled with strange and unexpected events that defy explanation, leaving us wondering whether they were simply random occurrences or the result of some mysterious force at work. These bizarre historical coincidences span centuries and continents, connecting people, places, and events in ways that seem almost too uncanny to be true. Here are some of the most astonishing coincidences that history has to offer. The Lincoln-Kennedy connection. Few historical coincidences are as famous, or as eerie, as the striking parallels between the lives and deaths of Presidents Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. These two men, separated by a century, share a series of similarities that are difficult to explain away as mere chance. The connections between them have fascinated historians and conspiracy theorists alike for decades. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, and John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress exactly 100 years later, in 1946. This 100-year gap continues with their presidential elections. Lincoln was elected president in 1860 and Kennedy in 1960. Both men were thrust into the national spotlight during times of deep division in the United States, Lincoln during the Civil War and Kennedy during the Civil Rights Movement. They both played significant roles in advancing civil rights, with Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation and Kennedy advocating for civil rights legislation that would be passed after his death. Their similarities extend into their personal lives as well. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were shot in the head on a Friday while sitting next to their wives. Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater, and Kennedy was shot while riding in a Lincoln car manufactured by the Ford Motor Company. Even more curiously, both presidents were accompanied by another couple, and in both cases, the other man was also injured. Major Henry Rathbone at Ford's Theater and Texas Governor John Connally in Kennedy's motorcade. Adding to the eerie nature of these coincidences, both presidents were succeeded by vice presidents named Johnson. Andrew Johnson succeeded Lincoln, and Lyndon B. Johnson succeeded Kennedy. Both Johnsons were Southern Democrats who had served in the Senate. Furthermore, Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy, and Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln, with each advising their respective president not to attend the event where they would ultimately be assassinated. The coincidences continue with the assassins. John Wilkes Booth, who killed Lincoln, was born in 1839, and Lee Harvey Oswald, who assassinated Kennedy, was born 100 years later in 1939. Both assassins were known by their three names, and both were captured and killed before they could stand trial. Booth was killed by Union soldiers just days after Lincoln's assassination, and Oswald was shot by Jack Ruby just days after killing Kennedy. While some of these connections may be purely coincidental, the sheer number of parallels between Lincoln and Kennedy's lives and deaths is astonishing. The Lincoln-Kennedy connection remains one of history's most fascinating coincidences, leaving us to wonder whether there is more at play than mere chance. The Titanic's prophetic tale. The sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912 was one of the most tragic maritime disasters in history, claiming over 1,500 lives. However, what many people don't know is that a novel written 14 years before the disaster eerily predicted the sinking of a giant ocean liner under similar circumstances. In 1898, American author Morgan Robertson published a novella titled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. The story centers around the Titan, a fictional British passenger ship described as unsinkable, which strikes an iceberg during its maiden voyage and sinks, leading to a massive loss of life due to an insufficient number of lifeboats. The similarities between the fictional Titan and the real Titanic are uncanny. Both ships were considered the largest and most luxurious of their time, and both were described as unsinkable. Both vessels struck icebergs in the North Atlantic in April, and both lacked enough lifeboats for all passengers. The eerie accuracy of Robertson's predictions has led some to speculate whether the author had some sort of premonition, while others view it as an extraordinary coincidence. The tragedy of the Ebbin brothers. One of the most chilling coincidences in modern history involves the Ebbin brothers from Bermuda, whose tragic deaths occurred exactly 1 year apart under nearly identical circumstances. The story of Erskine Lawrence Ebbin and his older brother, Neville Ebbin, is a haunting reminder of how fate can sometimes weave a narrative that seems too improbable to be true. On July 18, 1975, 17-year-old Erskine Lawrence Ebbin was riding his moped along a street in Hamilton, Bermuda, when he was struck and killed by a taxi. This tragic event might have been seen as an unfortunate accident, were it not for the fact that exactly 1 year earlier, on July 18, 1974, Erskine's older brother, Neville Ebbin, also 17 years old at the time, had died in an almost identical manner. Neville had been riding the same moped along the same street when he too was struck and killed by a taxi. The eerie similarities between the two accidents do not end there. Both brothers were struck by the same taxi driver, and both accidents occurred at the same intersection in Hamilton. To add another layer of mystery, the same passenger was in the taxi at the time of both accidents. The odds of two brothers dying in identical circumstances, exactly 1 year apart, involving the same taxi driver and passenger, are astronomically low, making this one of the most baffling coincidences in recent history. The Eban family was understandably devastated by the loss of both sons in such a tragic and bizarre manner. The events have left many people wondering whether there was some supernatural element at play, or if it was merely a case of extraordinarily bad luck. The tragedy of the Eban brothers continues to be a subject of fascination and sorrow, serving as a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of fate. The Curse of Tamerlane. In 1941, Soviet archaeologists unearthed the tomb of Tamerlane, the great Mongol conqueror, in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. The tomb bore a chilling inscription, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." Despite this ominous warning, the archaeologists proceeded with the excavation, removing Tamerlane's remains. According to legend, the tomb also carried a curse that anyone who disturbed Tamerlane's grave would unleash an even greater force of destruction. Just 2 days after the tomb was opened, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in military history, against the Soviet Union. The timing of the invasion, so closely following the disturbance of Tamerlane's tomb, led some to believe that the curse had been activated. The Soviet Union suffered devastating losses during the early months of the invasion. In a desperate attempt to reverse the curse, Soviet authorities reburied Tamerlane with full Islamic rituals in November 1942, just before the tide of war began to turn in the Soviets' favor. Whether by coincidence or something more, the Curse of Tamerlane remains one of history's most intriguing mysteries. The Ohio Connection, the Curse of Tecumseh. The Curse of Tecumseh, also known as the Curse of Tippecanoe, is a supposed curse that has affected American presidents elected in years divisible by 20. The curse is named after the Shawnee leader Tecumseh, who fought against American expansion in the early 19th century. After Tecumseh's defeat at the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811 and his death during the War of 1812, a legend arose that his brother, Tenskwatawa, placed a curse on the U.S. presidency. The curse seemingly began with the death of President William Henry Harrison, who won the presidency in 1840 and died of pneumonia just a month after taking office. Since then, every president elected in a year ending in 0 has either died in office or been the target of an assassination attempt, including Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, James A. Garfield, elected in 1880, William McKinley, re-elected in 1900, and John F. Kennedy, elected in 1960. The streak was broken by Ronald Reagan, who was elected in 1980 and survived an assassination attempt in 1981. Despite this, the Curse of Tecumseh remains a fascinating and eerie example of how historical coincidences can give rise to enduring myths and legends. The mystery of the dueling vice presidents. The early 19th century saw a bizarre coincidence involving two U.S. vice presidents, Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson. Aaron Burr, who served as vice president under Thomas Jefferson, famously killed Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, in a duel in 1804. Burr's political career never recovered from the scandal, and he lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity. Fast forward to 1864, when another vice president, Andrew Johnson, who served under Abraham Lincoln, was involved in a similarly strange coincidence. In the lead-up to the Civil War, Johnson was accused of planning a duel with a political rival, although the duel never took place. The connection between these two vice presidents, both serving under two of America's most iconic presidents and both involved in dueling scandals, is a curious footnote in the annals of U.S. history. The life and death of King Umberto I. On July 28, 1900, King Umberto of Italy was dining at a restaurant in Monza when he noticed that the restaurant owner bore a striking resemblance to him. Upon talking to the man, the king discovered even more bizarre coincidences. The owner, also named Umberto, had been born on the same day as the king, in the same town, and had married a woman with the same name as the king's wife. On the same day that King Umberto was crowned, the restaurant owner had opened his restaurant. The coincidences didn't end there. The day after this meeting, on July 29, 1900, King Umberto I was assassinated by an anarchist. That same day, the restaurant owner was killed in a mysterious shooting. The strange series of events connecting these two men has puzzled historians for over a century, leading some to speculate about the nature of fate and destiny. Conclusion: these bizarre historical coincidences remind us that history is full of strange and unexpected connections that defy easy explanation. Whether seen as mere chance or something more mysterious, these stories capture our imagination and challenge our understanding of the past. As we explore the curious ways in which people, events, and places intersect, we are left to wonder at the unpredictable and often inexplicable nature of the world we live in.